This is Matthew Cratter from Trader University, and today I want to talk about why inflation is much higher than you think. If you're interested in learning how the economy actually works so you can make money in bull and bear environments, be sure to hit that subscribe button. So I've been reading this book by Jeff Booth. It's called The Price of Tomorrow. I've also heard this argument in a few other places, but I think it's very, very interesting, and it may be something that you haven't heard before. It begins with the premise that technology is inherently deflationary. And what does deflationary mean? It just means that prices are going down. And as we all know, and sometimes we need to be reminded, technology makes prices go down. We can see this very simply in the history of writing, where you used to have to carve things into stone, as in the Egyptian hieroglyphics. And then we sort of moved to the medieval scriptoria, where you have one monk at the front reading the Bible, and other people copying it, other monks copying it. This was sort of like the old version of a copy machine. Obviously, books are very expensive when they had to be produced by hand like this. Gutenberg, the printing press, great example of an early printing technology that really changed the world, probably led to the Protestant Reformation. And then obviously in the 20th century, the typewriter and the word processor and computers, etc., where you don't even really need paper anymore. You can transmit electronic words, digital words, back and forth using email and text, etc. So this is a great example of technology driving down prices. Another, the classic example that Jeff Booth uses in his podcasts and interviews as well, is the iPhone. So it used to be you needed a compass and a camera, the old GPS guidance systems, GuideStar in some of the old cars, an altimeter to tell your altitude, a desktop for email, texting, maybe a BlackBerry phone, weather station, one of those little portable ones you put on your roof, all these different things, and now they're all on the iPhone. The iPhone's not a cheap product, but if you think about what it would have cost you in the old days to buy all these other things, it's actually a great example of technology making prices go down. Not even counting the fact that you have Google on there and you have access literally to almost infinite knowledge. The amount of things you can find on Google or in YouTube is really quite amazing. It's a little bit like one of these imaginary infinite libraries or medieval libraries. It's a great story by Borges you can read called the Library of Babel. That's sort of a version of this, kind of a dystopic version of this. Here, another example of technology making prices go down, or basically, even if prices don't go down, you get a lot more for your dollar. This is probably a $500 in current dollars TV, and then we have the current version, $500 or $600, the LED or flat screen or HD TV. So I don't want to belabor the point, but technology does cause deflation. We often hear that deflation is a bad thing, but deflation is actually a very good thing. It's a good thing if you have cash. Deflation is a very bad thing if you have a lot of debt. So we can say that Jeff Booth hypothesizes that due to technology, prices are falling something like 5 to 10% a year. It's become much cheaper to grow food. People used to believe that that the earth would not be able to support 1 billion people, much less 7 billion people. Now we can argue maybe the quality of the food has gone down, everyone eating just a lot of wheat and corn. But either way, food, we can now get better food for less money. It used to be only kings could use spices like cinnamon and nutmeg, and now anyone really has access to it in their kitchens. So thanks to technology, we do have deflation. Prices are falling. We have better computers for less money, as we talked about, desktops, laptops, and obviously smartphones like the iPhone. Not to mention AI taking over the world and automating so many complex tasks, figuring out how to self-drive a car, automated driving, figuring out what kind of music you like and putting it in your suggestion list, etc. So obviously AI, and eventually at some point AI and robots will clean your house and increasingly do all the things that you're doing today. This is sort of unfair version of AI. So technology is deflationary. Now let's talk about inflation as measured in the U.S. This is a CPI index. This is put out by the Federal Reserve. And their targeted inflation rate, this basically measures inflation for the average urban consumer in the U.S. This is the number that's always referred to. And there are a lot of problems with CPI inflation that I've talked about in other videos, which I'll link to below. But the targeted inflation rate is 2%. And you can see here that the Fed has somewhat succeeded in doing this. Inflation has been slightly below the 2% number, but it kind of alternates above. And we can say that we really have achieved roughly 2% inflation as measured by the CPI, which is a completely fake and false index. But nevertheless, it is an index. It measures something. It's obviously been changed over time to try to understate inflation. But I think the really scary thing is, let's just, for the sake of argument, say that we have had inflation of 2% a year as measured by the CPI. Let's say we actually believe government statistics. Let's say that we've achieved that 2% inflation target. But remember, prices falling due to technology. This is Jeff Booth's argument. Prices falling by 5 to 10% a year due to technology. And that suggests that the actual inflation rate, if you take 2% and add it to 5 to 10%, the actual inflation rate is really something closer to 7 to 12%. And the amount of debasement of the currency, devaluation of the dollar, devaluation of the actual purchasing power of the dollar has been understated due to technology keeping prices much lower than they would already be. So this suggests that the real damage that's being done to the economy, to the value of the dollar as a store of value, is much, much higher than is stated in CPI inflation. It's really closer, call it 10% a year. Now, who likes inflation? Well, people who have a lot of debt like inflation. If you have a giant mortgage on your house and you're leveraged to the gills and you have credit card debt and you have student loan debt, you obviously want inflation, because then you can pay off that debt with future dollars that are worth less. Over time, people's salaries tend to rise, and so that debt load, that debt burden gets much smaller relative to the value of the house, for example, that you've taken out a mortgage on. But the real actor that has a lot of debt that likes to see inflation is the U.S. government. Right now, as we can see here, we're sitting at about $26.5 trillion on our national debt, and this isn't even counting sort of the future entitlement spending, Social Security, Medicare, all these unfunded liabilities. You're talking numbers that are much closer to 70 to 100 trillion when you look into it. And so what is happening is we have our central bankers, our elites, trying to inflate this debt away. They are running the printing presses over time, and yet they're still unable to generate, well, basically the inflation they are generating, or the decrease in the purchasing power of the dollar, is hidden by falling prices due to technology. And so let's think about a world without central banks. If we didn't have central banks, we could see prices for everything falling 5 to 10% a year. Everything would get cheaper. People would have to work less. Technology, a lot of people define it as doing more with less. And this is really sort of the automated Jetsons future that we were promised and never got. Unfortunately, the amount of time people spend at work has really just gone up over time rather than going down over time. And we're on this horrible, endless treadmill because of central banks and because of money printing. And the future, if we could somehow get rid of these central banks, maybe move to a Bitcoin standard, the future is people working, people with a lot more leisure time, working maybe a 4-hour work week, to use Tim Ferriss's phrase, rather than a 40-hour work week. And the way this would make the way this would be made possible is just falling prices. And what I really want to emphasize is that this sort of inflation really hurts working class and middle class people much more than our elites. Our elites like inflation, like low interest rates, etc., because they can do various strategies on Wall Street. They can lever up companies. They can take out large amounts of debt and use it to purchase assets, use it to purchase stocks, and lever up positions and make a lot of money. But it does hurt. It hurts regular people. Regular people really should see their rents falling. They should see the food prices falling. everything should be going down in price. And instead of this utopian future here, this technological utopia, instead we have the future of Jerome Powell, the Federal Reserve, the central banks, and our politicians, both Democrats, both Republicans, people on the left and the right, who are perpetrating this system and pretending that everything's okay. So I thought that'd be useful. It's a nice way of looking at inflation and what the real inflation rate is. It's probably really closer to 7 to 12% in terms of the devaluation of the US dollar. This is one reason that gold has been doing quite well, and it's another reason that Bitcoin's done amazingly well over the last 10 years and should continue to do really, really well. Please hit that subscribe and like button if you found this video helpful. Let me know your questions and comments in the comment section below, and I'll see you in the next video. Have a good weekend.